Thanks, Zoe. Morning, everybody. Thank you all for this opportunity. Thanks to Priscilla and IAQ for inviting me along. And also a great thanks to everybody that put so much effort into making this event happen. Certainly not an easy thing to do at the moment in current circumstances. A shorter title, I think, for my presentation is Smart Cities, a Smart Idea. So what I hope to do this morning is not tell you how to think about this. I'm not here to tell anybody how to think about smart cities or what to think about them, but rather to give you some things to think about and some ideas that maybe you haven't thought about before, and some ideas that we can explore then later in discussion if people would like to. So the first thing that I think is very important to acknowledge and realize is that smart cities are something that we're not now able to back out of. We're rushing headlong into this paradigm. We've actually been in this space probably for about 15 years, you might say already. Once people started carrying iPhones around particularly, that was the start of a massive stream of personal real-time data that could be fed back to cities and various entities and institutions from which they could then make real-time decisions. So we're already on the road to smart cities. We're a fair bit down the road, but we also have a long way to go, and how we chart that journey is largely going to be up to some of the personal decisions we make, and also leadership and governance. So when we think about smart cities, I think first of all we should consider that they are an integrated digital and spatial future. You wind back the clock a few decades, and cities were largely spatial objects. Now they're increasingly becoming more digital objects. So they're digital objects with a spatial presentation. I would liken this to driving in a Tesla. If you've ever driven a Tesla, it feels a bit more like a computer on wheels than a conventional car. So I like to think of the smart city in similar sorts of terms. Now, powering all this, of course, and this is something we heard a lot about yesterday, is the Internet of Things. So we're talking about trillions of sensors being deployed across cities, in various different ways and in various different settings. They can be tracking the performance of infrastructure, they can be tracking health performance, they can be tracking where you walk and for how long. They can be tracking many, many things. And so within the context of the smart city paradigm, we're going to have trillions of sensors embedded in billions of objects, reporting data all of the time, which we then use complex algorithms to decode and make decisions around. So as we move more into the Internet of Things, and we move just from having computers and telephones and TVs that are connected to the internet, and we move instead into a phase where we have every household appliance connected to the internet, your car is connected to the internet, traffic lights are connected, everything is connected to the internet. So that's the Internet of Things. And so when that really fully comes online, whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, and I'm pretty on the fence about it myself, that's going to be a huge boost for the smart city agenda, because that's really going to propel things forward because of this massive new stash of data that's going to come through. And that then is going to be linked with another concept, and this is only just sort of coming to light, I guess, relatively recently, and this is the Internet of Bodies. This is the other side of the coin. And this is, you know, again, either a great opportunity or something very sinister, depending on how you look at it. You can read some of the Internet of Bodies accessories and devices there on the image for yourself, where they'll be used, what they might be used for, and what they might track. And so it's not just a question of what data these things will collect, but it's also who gets to see it and what they get to do with it. So there's going to be some interesting questions around that. So we're going to come back to that in a while. To give us a few other thinking points around the smart city and what it might look like, I thought we might walk through some of the accessories of the smart city, such as they'll be outside of the hidden sensors that you won't see. But what else is going to be characteristic of the smart city? Well, we're going to see lots of these guys for a start. You're going to see an awful lot of drones. In fact, you're not just going to see an awful lot of drones are going to see you. And then in turn, you're going to hear them. So I might even go out on a limb here, and I was thinking about this earlier, I might go out on a limb here and say the largest upcoming challenge for urban noise management is drones. Because right now, you know what one drone sounds like in all probability. You've heard one, that nasally loud whine that they make. Now imagine dozens or hundreds of them flying around at any one time. You're talking about a significant amount of urban noise and urban surveillance and urban disruption. And so when people get excited about their Amazon Prime delivery being dropped off by drone, well, there are many other sides to that as well. Surveillance, encroachment, lack of privacy, noise, visual pollution, hazard, and so on. So drones are going to be central to the smart city. Are they going to be a good or a bad thing? Well, they'll probably be both. And we heard about autonomous vehicles already this morning. Yes, they're probably coming on stream. They'll more than likely be EV. But you take it one step further, we're moving, it would seem, into a situation where autonomous vehicles are not owned by individuals, but rather are owned by corporations, and we use them on a sort of a ride-sharing basis. Now, that's all well and good until you consider what actually happens if you don't have your own vehicle. What if you're reliant on an external third-party provided network of vehicles to get from A to B? What if you have an emergency? What if we get so far down the road in the smart city that we end up in some sort of a social credit system where you try and call an autonomous vehicle to take you someplace and you get a message on your phone saying, sorry, you've traveled too much this month, you can't go anywhere. You know, so these are things to think about. Something else that we're going to see a lot more of, and that's going to see a lot more of us, is surveillance technology, both at the obvious scale, which is cameras, and we already see them everywhere. We're already hugely surveilled. I mean, for example, if you live in London, you're caught on security cameras somewhere between 300 and 500 times a day. That's going to scale up for everybody everywhere. There'll be no escaping it, and it's going to be compounded by wearable surveillance technology. Cops are already wearing body cameras. That is going to become much more common, not just in the police force, but across society. And so we are heading into a situation where you will be permanently surveilled from all angles, and you won't necessarily know you're being surveilled. I mean, you could already be surveilled. You probably are already being surveilled all the time if you think about it. Who knows what your smartphone is listening to? I mean, we've all seen the stories about, you mentioned, you know, that you're interested in buying toys for your dog, and suddenly you start getting ads for dog toys on everything that you click on. So, you know, this is all part of the opportunity and hazard. Tracking apps, if you thought that QR codes were going to go away after COVID, I'm afraid you're sadly very wrong. Governments are not going to back out of this quickly. They love the control, they love the data, they love the understanding that it brings. They're already talking about vaccine passports. Entirely uncritically, it would seem, there doesn't seem to be much of a conversation about the philosophical implications of a movement pass, but we'll maybe save that for later. The other image there is actually a real image of an Italian gentleman who tattooed the QR code for his green pass, the Italian version of a vaccine passport, tattooed it onto his arm so he could go in and out of McDonald's easier. Now, we don't have to look too far in history to see the last time that we tattooed IDs on people and what that led to. Now, this chap is willing to do it for a Big Mac. What are you willing to do it for? And then, of course, there's going to be the other friendly face of the smart city, which is going to be the robots that we keep hearing about. Boston Dynamics, a company that's largely owned by Alphabet Corporation, the owners of Google, are developing these very sophisticated humanoid robots, which have enormous capabilities, capacity, agility, strength, and so on and so forth. So they might be helping old people across the street in the future, or they might be turning up at the door when your Internet of Bodies sensor says that you haven't taken your 25th booster shot and you need to go to the wellness camp out by Toowoomba. There'll be one of these along to take you. So again, how this goes is largely dependent on what we're willing to tolerate. So where are we heading? Well, we're heading for full integration. We're heading for an integration between me, this, and the city, and that for everybody, scaled up across all domains. And what will that bring? Well, it'll bring good and bad things. It'll certainly bring convenience. It'll also bring control. It'll bring fluidity. Things will be changeable. Things will be manageable. There'll be dynamism around how things change. But there'll also be predictability, that'll be good, there'll be surveillance, and there'll be safety. So again, it's like, do you want safety, do you want freedom? How do you have both? In essence, what happens is we become the city and the city becomes us, and the further we move into the smart city paradigm via the Internet of Bodies and the Internet of Things, the more pronounced this is going to become. So as we start to wind this up, I'm going to look at this quote. This is from Alexander Solzhenitsyn, talking about how repressive regimes in the USSR were allowed to carry out the sorts of atrocities that they were. This quote is often paraphrased that the line between good and evil runs down the heart of every person. And so what he was really trying to say with that is basically you get what you're willing to put up with. You get what you consent to. And so as we form the smart city, we need to bear that in mind, because decisions that we make now are going to have long-term implications, not just for us, but also for our children and our grandchildren and every generation that comes afterwards. So in smart city terms, what does this mean? Well, it means with the right decisions, the right governance, the right leadership, and the right form of programming and data management, we might well end up with the smart city utopia that we're so often promised. With the wrong decisions, we're going to end up in a social credit prison, much like they already have in China, where your entire access to the world is contingent on your performance and your behavior and data that's logged against you. So every traffic fine that you get is going to be a negative mark. Every time your child is called into the principal's office in school, that's a negative mark. Every time you help your community, that's a positive mark. What's your overall mark? Does it allow you to travel? Does it allow you to go to the supermarket, and so on and so forth? So these are the two extremes. We could end up at either. We need to be careful about which direction we go. So to take Solzhenitsyn's quote and rephrase it, I think a good closing remark is to think about the smart city in these terms. The line separating good and evil passes not through states nor between political parties either, but right through every algorithm. So the algorithms are going to be key decision makers in this. We will be the ones to program them. We need to be very sure how we're going about that challenge. Thank you very much.